Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a short video on how to factorize trinomials as well as how to factorize the sum and difference of two cubes. If we look at our first question, we have x squared plus 5x plus 6. So the process that I'm going to use to factorize this trinomial is I'm going to look at my third term. My third term is positive 6. That positive tells me two things. It tells me that I'm going to have the same signs in both of my brackets and that I'm adding. What am I adding? I'm adding the factors of 6 to give me my middle term, which is a 5. So to factorize this trinomial, I'm going to have two brackets. Now, this same signs means that the signs are going to be the same inside the bracket. I need to know what the signs are going to be. So in order to know what the signs are going to be, I look at my middle term. My middle term is a positive, which means that both of the signs are going to be a positive. I take my x and I'm going to factorize my x into this bracket. So x squared becomes x and x. Now, in order to get the terms inside the bracket, I need to write out the factors of 6. So the factors of 6 are 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Now, which of those factors, when added together, give me 5? Now, do you agree that 1 minus 6 or 6 minus 1 would give me 5? But then I'd be subtracting. And I can't be subtracting, I need to be adding because my third term was positive. So that means that 2 and 3 are going to give me my middle term of 5. So it will be x plus 2, x plus 3. If I used the same example of x squared, but I put a minus 5x plus 6. To factorize this, I would look at my third term, and my third term is positive. So that positive tells me two things. It tells me that the signs are going to be the same signs, and that I'm adding the factors of 6 to give me my middle term, which is a 5. So when I factorize this, I know that I'm going to have two brackets, and it says that they're going to have the same sign. Why are they going to have the same sign? Because my third term is positive. How do I determine what that sign is going to be? I look at my middle term. So my middle term is a negative, which means that both of these brackets will have negatives in them. I factorize the x squared, it becomes x and x. And then looking here, because I've already done the factors of 6 over here, I have 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. Which of those two sets of factors, when added together, give me 5? It's still 2 and 3, except now I just have a negative 2 and a negative 3 inside the bracket because my middle term was negative. If I have x squared minus 9x plus 20. All right, I'm going to factorize this trinomial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my third term. My third term is a positive, so that tells me two things. It tells me that I'm going to have the same signs and that I'm adding. What am I adding? I'm adding the factors of 20 to give me my middle term, which is a 9. So I'll have two brackets. And I know that the signs need to be the same because it's same signs. Why is it same signs? Because my third term is positive. What are the signs going to be? I look at my middle term. My middle term is negative. So I know that both of the signs inside these brackets will be a negative. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to list out the factors of 20. What are the factors of 20? 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. Now, 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5, which combination of those factors when added together, because my middle term, my third term is positive, when added together give me my middle term, which is 9, 4 and 5. So because the signs are the same, it doesn't matter which bracket I put it in. So the one bracket will be 4, the one bracket will be 5. This x will then go to the front of each of the brackets. So if I again had the same thing, but I have x squared plus 9x plus 20, I've already written out the factors of 20, so I'm not going to write them out again. My third term here is a positive 20, which means two things, that the signs are going to be the same and that I'm adding the factors of 20 to give me my middle term, which is 9. So I'm going to write this out into two brackets. The third term is a positive 20, which means both signs are going to be the same. How do I decide what the signs are going to be? I look at my middle term. My middle term is a positive, which means both the signs are going to be positive. I then factorize the x squared to x, and then the factors that when added give me 9 are 4 and 5, so I put 4 and 5. If I have x squared minus 7x plus 12. I look at my third term. My third term is positive 12. So that tells me two things. It tells me that I'm going to have the same signs and that I'm adding the factors of 12 to give me my middle term, which is 7. So I'm going to list out the factors of 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. So I'm going to write this out into two brackets. If I look at my third term is positive, so that told me that I was adding and that they're the same sign. What sign are they? They are going to be the middle term sign, which is a negative. So both the brackets, because it has to be the same sign, are going to be negative. Now, which set of those factors, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, or 3 and 4, when added together give me 7? That's 3 and 4. So 3 and 4 will go into each of my brackets, and then I factorize the x squared as x and x. If I have x squared plus 11x plus 24, I look at my third term, and my third term is positive. So that tells me two things, that I'm going to have the same sign and that I'm adding the factors of 24 to give me my middle term of 11. So I'm going to quickly write out the factors of 24. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. So those are the factors. Now, which of those factors, when I add them together, why? Because my third term was a positive. Which of those factors, when I add together, give me 11? That's 8 and 3. So that means that I'm going to have two brackets. What is the sign going to be inside the brackets? I look at my middle term. My middle term is positive, which means that both of the brackets are going to be positive. The x squared factorizes as x, and then the 24 factors as 3 and 8. If I have 2x squared plus 18x plus 36, this brings me to my very first rule of factorization, and irrespective of whether I'm factorizing a binomial, a trinomial, a polynomial, my first rule of factorization is to look for a common. Now I have a coefficient of the x squared, but the coefficient of the x squared is a 2. And if I look at the 18 and the 36, 2 goes into 18 and into 36 as well. This isn't, however, an equation, so I can't divide everything by 2, because if I were to divide everything by 2, I'm changing the value here. So I'm going to factorize by taking out the 2. 2x squared divided by 2 is x squared. 18x divided by 2 is positive 9x. And positive 36 divided by 2 is positive 18. Now, inside that bracket, I have x squared plus 9x plus 18. So I'm just going to carry down this 2. And then I know that I'm going to have two brackets. I look at my third term, because inside the bracket I have a normal trinomial, so I'm going to look at my third term. My third term is positive 18. So that tells me two things. It tells me that the signs are going to be the same. What are the signs going to be? I look at the middle term. They're both going to be positive because they're going to be the same sign. It also tells me that I'm adding the factors of 18 to give me my middle term of 9. If I write out the factors of 18, I have 1 and 18, 2 and 9, and 3 and 6. Which of those factors, when added together, give me a 9, 3 and 6? So the one bracket will have a 3, the one bracket will have a 6. X squared factorized becomes x and x. So what happens if I have a negative third term? Well, in this case, I have x squared minus x minus 6. So my third term is negative. Now the negative tells me two things as well. So remember, a positive third term told me that the signs were going to be the same and that I'm adding the factors. Having a negative third term tells me that I'll have different signs. So instead of same signs, I'll have different signs, and then instead of adding, I will be subtracting. So now, I'm going to have two brackets, but the signs need to be different. So for them to be different means that one needs to be positive and one needs to be negative. When we had a positive third term, we looked at the middle term to determine the signs in the brackets. Now when we have a negative third term, we're going to do a similar thing, and we're still going to look to the middle term. It's going to determine something. So I'm going to quickly write out the factors of 6. 1 and 6, 2 and 3. Now which of those two sets of factors, when subtracted, give me 1? It's going to be 2 and 3. But now in my one bracket there's a minus, in my one bracket there's a plus. So I need to know which factor to put where. So I look at my middle term, and my middle term is negative. So I'm going to look at my bigger number, and that's what's going to get the negative. So the 3 will get the negative, so therefore the 2 will get the positive. X squared factorized becomes x and x. If I have x squared plus 11x minus 12, I look at my third term, and my third term is negative. So a negative third term tells me two things. It tells me that I'll have different signs, and that I'm subtracting the factors of 12 to give me my middle term of 11. What are the factors of 12? 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. So I'm going to factorize this into two brackets. Now, one of the brackets will have a minus and one of the brackets will have a plus. It doesn't matter which order I put the brackets in, so long as what goes inside the bracket is in the right place. So now I'm going to decide, is it 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4 that when subtracted gives me 11? It's 1 and 12. So 1's going to go into 1 and 12's going to go into the other, but I need to know which one goes where. So I look at the middle term, and the middle term is a positive, which tells me that the bigger number, so in this case the 12, needs the positive. So the 12 goes with the positive, the 1 goes with the negative, and x squared becomes x and x. X squared minus 2x minus 15. I look at my third term is negative, so that tells me two things. It tells me that the signs are going to be different, and it tells me that I'm subtracting the factors of 15 to give me my middle term of 2. So what are the factors of 15? 1 and 15, and 3 and 5. Which set of factors, 1 and 15 or 3 and 5, when subtracted give me a 2, the 3 and the 5? So I'm going to factorize this into two brackets. Now the third term was negative, which told me that the signs are going to be different in the two brackets. So one of the brackets will have a plus sign, and one of the brackets will have a negative sign. Now I need to know which one will have a plus and which one will have a minus. So for that, I look at my middle term sign. My middle term is a negative, which means the bigger number, so in this case it will be the 5, will have the negative. So the 5 and the 3, x squared becomes x and x. Last example, if I have x squared minus 2x minus 8, I look at my third term. My third term is negative, so that tells me two things. It tells me that the signs are going to be different, and that I'm subtracting the factors of 8 to give me my middle term of 2. What are the factors of 8? 1 and 8, and 2 and 4. So which of those factors when subtracted from each other will give me 2? That's 2 and 4. So I'll put my two brackets. The middle term was negative, which tells me that the signs are going to be different. So one will be a positive, one will be a negative. I need to decide which one's going to be which. So I look at my middle term. My middle term is a negative, which means that the bigger number of the two will be a negative. So that means that the 4 will be a negative, the 2 will be a positive. The x squared becomes x and x. When we're talking about factorizing the sum and difference of two cubes, it's really, really simple. Firstly, you need a binomial, two terms. It doesn't matter whether it's a plus or a minus, so long as they're two terms. Both of the terms need to be perfect cubes. Sometimes there'll be an exponent, and the exponent doesn't need to be a perfect cube. What the exponent needs to be is divisible by 3. Because remember, when you cube root an exponent, you divide the exponent by 3. When you square root an exponent, you divide the exponent by 2, and so on. When we factorize the sum and difference of two cubes, we're going to have two brackets. One bracket will be a binomial, and one bracket will be a trinomial. The sign of the binomial bracket will be the same as the sign in the question. The first sign in the second bracket will be opposite whatever sign you've just written. And then the last sign in the last bracket will always be a positive. Let's do it. 8x cubed plus y cubed. So we have a binomial. So now we're doing the sum. So now we need to look at everything in this binomial. So 8, is 8 a perfect cube? Yes. X cubed, is that a perfect cube? Is that exponent divisible by 3? Yes. Y cubed, yes. So to factorize this, I'm going to have two brackets. One will be a binomial and one will be a trinomial. What I like to do is I like to start with the sign so that I don't mess it up. So the sign in the first bracket will be whatever the sign is in the question. So if the sign in the question is a plus, the first bracket will be a plus. If the sign in the question is a minus, the first bracket will be a minus. Then the first sign in the second bracket will be opposite whatever you've just put down. So I've just put down a plus, which means that the sign will be a minus. And the last sign in the second bracket is always positive. All right. So now I have my signs sorted out. So in order to get the terms that go inside these brackets, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by cube rooting each of the two terms. So the cube root of 8x cubed, the cube root of 8 is 2, the cube root of x cubed is x. So now I've said the cube root of 8x cubed is 2x. Then the cube root of y cubed is y. Now what I like to do is no longer look at the question. Okay? Don't look at the question anymore. Obviously don't do that. I've got an undo button. So I undo it. Cool. Now, to get the next terms in the second bracket, I am going to work with these terms that I've just created. Alright, so to get the first term, I'm going to say 2x squared. So I'm going to take the first term, let me color code it. I'm going to take this first term and I'm going to square it, not cube it, square it. So 2x, and then if that's squared, 2 squared is 4x squared. Then to get the last term, I'm going to square that term. So if I square the y, I'm left with y squared. Then to get the middle term, I'm going to multiply these together, and that's what's going to give me the middle term, and 2x times y is 2xy. If I have 125a cubed minus 1000b cubed, I have the difference of two cubes. I need to check that they're cubes. 125 is a cube, a cubed is a cube, 1000 and b cubed. So I'm good to go. So to factorize this, I'm going to have two brackets. One will be a binomial and one will be a trinomial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the sign. So the sign from the question is the sign that I'm going to put in the first bracket. So in the first bracket, I'm putting a negative. Then the first term in the second bracket is opposite whatever I've just put down. So I've just put down a negative, which means that the first term in the second bracket is now a positive. And then this third term is always a positive. In order to get what goes inside the bracket, I'm going to work with these two terms now, because now I've already done the signs. The cube root of 125a cubed. The cube root of 125 is 5. The cube root of a cubed is a. The cube root of 1,000 is 10. The cube root of b cubed is b. Now I've got that, so I can no longer look at the question, and now I'll look at my first bracket that I just created. So to get the first term, I'm going to square the first term. So 5a, if I square it, becomes 25a squared. To get the last term, I'm going to take the last term and I'm going to square it. 10b, if I square it, 10 is 100b squared. And then the middle term in my second bracket will be the multiplication of these two terms, because I already put the signs in before I started. 5 times 10 is 50, a times b, which is ab. If I have 54 x to the power of 6 minus 16. Alright, so I have 54 x to the power of 6 minus 16. I have a minus and I have a binomial, but 16 and 54 have a common factor. So both of these numbers are divisible by 2. So I'm going to start by removing my common factor of 2. So 54 divided by 2 is 27 x to the power of 6 minus 16 divided by 2, which is 8. Inside my bracket, 27 is a perfect cube, x to the 6. Now the 6 wants to throw you off, but don't worry, 6 is divisible by 3, so that's fine, and 8 is a perfect cube. Now remember, whenever you take out a common, you have to keep the common. So bring the common down, and then you're going to have two brackets, one with a binomial, one with a trinomial. So we're going to start with the signs. The first sign will be exactly what it is in the question. So in the question it's a negative, so here we're going to have a negative. Then the first sign in the second bracket will be opposite whatever I've just written. So I've just written a negative, which means it's going to be a positive, and the third sign, or the third term, will always be a positive. To get what goes inside my first bracket, I'm going to cube root my first two terms. The cube root of 27 is 3, and then the cube root of x to the 6 is x squared. The cube root of 8 is 2. To get my remaining terms, I'm going to now square what I'm left with. So my first term, 3x squared squared, 3 squared is 9, x squared squared is x to the power of 2 times 2, which is 4. My last term will be determined by squaring that term, so 2 squared is 4. And then my middle term will be determined by multiplying these two together, so 3x squared times 2, 3 times 2 is 6, and carry my x squared. So this is our last example, and it's a little bit more tricky, but the process remains exactly the same as what we have been doing. So I have a binomial, the difference of two terms. Both of these terms are perfect cubes. If I look at x minus y cubed, this whole bracket is being cubed, which means that I am able to then cube root that whole bracket. So the cube root of a whole bracket cubed will be just the brackets. So when I'm looking at it, I have this whole bracket is a perfect cube, 64 is a perfect cube, and x cubed is a perfect cube. So I'm going to start it exactly the same way as what I would do, and that's with my two brackets. I'm just going to make my brackets just a little bit bigger this time. So I'm going to start with my signs. So the sign in my first bracket will be the same as the question. Now obviously I'm writing it a little bit to the side because the x minus y is a whole bracket that needs to come into the bracket. So my first sign is the same sign as the question. Then my first sign in my second bracket is opposite whatever I've just written down. So I've just written down a minus, which means that the first term here will be a positive, the first sign. And the last sign is always a positive. So now I'm going to cube root my two terms. So the cube root of x minus y cubed is x minus y, and I'm just going to keep it in brackets. The cube root of 64x cubed, the cube root of 64 is 4. The cube root of x cubed is x. Now I no longer look at the question. Now I'm looking at my binomial that I've just created. So my first term in my second bracket is created by squaring my first term in my first bracket, but it's a bracket. But that's fine. I'm just going to say x minus y all squared. The last term is created by squaring the second term in the first bracket, and 4x, if I square it, 4 squared is 16, x squared. And then my last term is created by multiplying these two terms together. You don't have to worry about the sign because we already did the sign. X minus y, that bracket times the 4x will be 4x into the bracket of x minus y. So when I clean everything up, so my first bracket will become x minus y minus 4x. Then my second bracket, I have x minus y all squared, which is x squared. When I FOIL it out, x squared minus 2xy plus y squared. So I'll just color code that for you. So that came from the squaring of that binomial. Then this 4 is going to jump into the bracket and it's going to multiply with all of that. So I'll have positive 4x times x is positive 4x squared. Positive 4x times negative y is negative 4xy. And then carry down my positive 16x squared. Now I'm going to look for like terms. So in my first bracket, I have x minus 4x, which is negative 3x minus y, into, in the next bracket, I have x squared plus 4x plus 16x. X squared plus 4x is 5x squared plus 16x, which is 21x squared. Then I have minus 2xy minus 4xy, which is minus 6xy, and then carry down my plus y squared. So there you have your final answer. If you wanted to, you could neaten this up by removing this negative out of the bracket, and then you'd have negative into that bracket. In a future video, I'm going to show you how to factorize a trinomial with a coefficient. I hope that this video helped you and that it was enjoyable. See you soon.